Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 26.4.2 released to the public earlier this week, and iOS 26.5 Beta 3 released to developers and public beta testers as well. But there's even more to talk about since the iOS 26.4.2 is out what's new video. We'll talk about the latest Apple news, we'll also talk about some features, and we'll talk about the overall experience. Not just my experience, but your experience based off the YouTube community poll on the post page, where at the time of this video there's 11,000 votes and 125 comments. I've gone over all the comments to determine what the updates are like for most people, so be sure to stick around toward the end of the video where I'll read some of your comments as well. Now we know Siri 2.0 is coming, and Google will now help power some of it using their Gemini models. Google this week announced on stage that they have a partnership with Apple and will power the next Siri later this year. They confirmed that basically Siri 2.0 is launching with iOS 27. So this is the first time publicly Google has actually said anything about it. Apple confirmed that they're working with Google as well earlier this year, so it looks like it's coming later this year for sure. Of course, the big news this week is that Tim Cook announced his retirement, and this is some very unexpected news that marks the end of an era. John Ternus will take over, and it's said that he's more like Steve Jobs when it comes to overall design and being picky about design and the quality of it compared to Tim Cook, where he was more of a numbers guy and supply chain guy, but obviously brought Apple into a multi-trillion-dollar company. Also, Johnny Cerrugi is now taking over John Ternus's position, but they're reorganizing the overall structure a little bit, and this is great news as he's someone that helped with the M series processors and has brought some great life into Mac this year. So this is something I'm looking very forward to. It's definitely marking the end of an era, and we'll have to see what the next version of Apple is like after he actually takes the CEO position on September 1st. So he should be introducing the iPhone 18 this time around. Also, in an all-hands meeting with Apple, John Ternus said that there was an incredible roadmap ahead, and that also he said that they're about to change the world again. The future certainly seems bright for Apple based on this, but again, it will take some time to see what John Ternus does, how he influences Apple, and what he does compared to Tim Cook over the many years to follow. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Tim Cook brought Apple from a multi-billion-dollar company to a $4 trillion company, but also he recently talked about some mistakes he made. He said his first really big mistake was Apple Maps. It wasn't ready at launch, and it took years to catch up, but now it's used over Google Maps and others by many. So it's one of the best mapping apps out there, especially in the United States. I've used it traveling to New York City, for example, and found it to be more accurate and have better traffic updates than Google Maps did at the time. So when I'm visiting New York City, I typically use Apple Maps as I find it to be a little bit better. And speaking of Apple Maps, it now has an update with an immersive and detailed 3D experience for the upcoming Miami F1 race. If we go into the Maps app, you can see the overall track here. So if we switch back maybe to the 2D mode, you'll see the grandstand. You can see all of the different turns. You can go into the viewing platform, see what it looks like, and get more information about it. So this is something that's been updated. Definitely check it out if you're interested in F1, and you can see more information about it here. Apple also pushed a new ad this week promoting the iPhone and Apple Watch working together for health. They pushed this on their YouTube channel. You'll see it says listen to your body, and it says health with iPhone plus Apple Watch. So it just makes a compelling argument why you would want to maybe trust Apple's health using iPhone and Apple Watch together. When it comes to features this week, well, Tap to Pay on iPhone has been around for a while, but it now launched in Malaysia. On April 22nd, you'll see Apple posted on their newsroom website where it says Apple brings Tap to Pay on iPhone to Malaysia, so it should be available there now. With iOS 26.5, it seems we could be getting a new wallpaper. If we go into our wallpapers here, slide over and go to add a new one, and within the wallpaper, Apple updates Unity and Pride every year, and it looks like they're adding a new Pride Luminance wallpaper according to Mark Gurman with iOS 26.5. Now also one other thing Apple is telling developers is to update their accessibility nutrition labels. So it says prepare your app for accessibility nutrition labels. This is new in the developer app, and it's just going over more information. There's transcripts for it, code as well, so if you want to prepare your app for that, you can. Those accessibility labels have to do with what's in the app and what it's tracking, for example, with data used to track you, data linked to you in Instagram, for example, and then, of course, accessibility, where Instagram doesn't have it, but they're going to require it soon. And speaking of accessibility, in just a couple weeks, typically we'll get the first look at what we expect with the next version of iOS. iOS 27 is expected to bring a few new features, and accessibility features are usually shown off before Apple introduces it to the public at WWDC. As far as features found in iOS 26.5, those found in Beta 1 and 2 have to do with end-to-end encryption in RCS. Apple Map icons have been updated a little bit. So if we go into Maps, you'll see here, if you go to Search, tap in the search bar, you'll get new icons here for things such as suggestions with gas stations and more, as well as suggested places that go along with it. In addition to that, we'll have ads in Apple Maps in the future. However, this will show up like they do in the App Store, only when you're in search typically, and not all over Maps like Google does. Also, we'll have notification forwarding in the EU. We'll also have a quick pairing option that goes along with Apple's Magic Trackpad, Magic Mouse, and keyboard. That's very nice to see as well. And then also iPhone to Android transfer options. That has to do with messages transferring all 1 year or 30 days. And then within the Books app, within the code, it mentions something to do with awards. And then we're also getting keyboard layout updates. So those are all coming with iOS 26.5 once it releases to the public. There's a couple app updates to talk about this time around, so if we go into the App Store, Apple's Invite app got a big update with quite a few new features. You'll see there's about 7 here with image playground themes that are now available. Also, hosts can now manually edit the guest list to update guest responses. A new Invites iMessage app is there. Also, an all-new All Events view in the dashboard is there. Hosts can now share or download an image of their invite card. And the Apple Music shared playlist tile now offers personalized playlist suggestions. Also, hosts can now specify the time zone. And also, the update contains bug fixes and performance improvements. Of course, we don't have a whole lot more information than that, but it is a significant update. And it was updated a day or so ago, so make sure that you update to version 1.8.0. And while there's not very exciting updates here, Apple Music Classical was updated as well with bug fixes. So you'll see here it says stability and performance enhancements. So that was updated the other day as well with Apple Music Classical. Now, iPhone 17 Pro has been out for well over 6 months at this point. I've been using it full-time for most of those months, and overall the experience is quite good. I was curious what your battery health was like. We'll take a look at mine a little bit later, but let me know your current battery health in the comments below, and we'll talk about that in future updates as well. When it comes to releases, well, next week we could see a new beta, so iOS 26.5 Beta 4 could come out as soon as Monday, or we could have the release candidate. We don't know which version they'll push, but if we get Beta 4, we could see an RC the following week with a public release around the 11th. If we see an RC, we could see the public release around May 4th. Of course, iOS 27 is what we're looking forward to, and the first features we could see for that could be in the second week of May. Apple typically pushes out the accessibility updates before they push out the full update in WWDC, so that's what we would expect there. Maybe around May 11th to the 13th, like they did last year, we could see all of those features for the first time. Of course, we'll see iOS 27 Beta 1 on June 8th typically, with betas throughout the summer and a public release typically in September around the iPhone 18 launch. Now, as far as the overall experience, let's first talk about the AirPods. AirPods Pro 3 definitely had some issues for me on 26.4.1 and iOS 26.5 Beta 2. However, with Beta 3 and 26.4.2, they seem to have improved overall, and connectivity with the Mac is still hit or miss for whatever reason when I'm editing videos, so I can't really do that reliably, but I can use AirPods Max 2 wired with that. So this is something that's changed. There's been no firmware updates for the AirPods, but maybe something to do with the OS. So hopefully we'll see Apple push a new macOS update soon to address some of those issues. When it comes to the experience of iOS 18.7.8, that was available as an alternative to iOS 26, and Apple is now pushing it to all of the devices supported by it. So that's great news. If you update over the air, and you'll see here on this device, we'll check for software update, give it a moment to come back, and you'll see it's available. So we have 26.4.2, but if you scroll down here, 18.7.8 is also available. So that's great to see. And of course, if you want to stay on iOS 18, you can do that, but you already have to be on a version of iOS 18 to upgrade to this. Now, those that commented on it, there were only 2 comments in the YouTube community poll. None of them had any issues with this. They had zero issues with battery, bugs, or anything else. They said it's smooth and fast, no real issues throughout, everything's working as expected. With iOS 26.4.2, I have it on the iPhone Air, and many people are saying it's much better. It's very positive as far as what people think of it, and there's bugs that have been fixed, things such as the lock screen bubble showing and having no information. That's been resolved. Also, Safari is now smooth and fast again. So if we go into this, we'll go to Apple here. and it'll be smooth and fast. You'll see it loads nice and fast. If we go into maybe learn about iPad Air, it should load quickly here. There we go. And everything is working as you would expect. So nice and smooth, much better than before. And CarPlay is now fixed based on the comments. I didn't see a single person that had issues with CarPlay say that they still had issues. Also, RAM management is much better. Going into different apps, having them reload seems to happen far less. So this is just booted up recently. Of course, there's a splash screen in there, but I booted this up recently and you'll see it's keeping things in RAM. Search input lag has been fixed for the most part. So again, Apple here, it doesn't seem to lag, but there are still some issues. So there's some stutter when swiping from time to time, specifically when unlocking. So swipe up, swipe, and it seems like it's fast and fluid now, but sometimes it does lag. Also, the text to Siri option isn't working properly in this update. So again, if I type Apple, there's no suggestions, but they did fix it with 26.5. Also, the wallpaper bug is still there, so you'll see how vibrant this is. Swipe home, and it desaturates just a little bit. It seems like it's much better, though. Also, resizing a widget is causing resprings for some people, so we'll see if we can maybe resize this and then swipe back. Some people are saying it resprings. I'm not seeing that, but some people have that. Also, it does respring in Safari on the iPad still. So on the iPad specifically, what happens if you have multiple tabs open and then you use the compact tab bar, if you go into an extension and then maybe tap on that extension, it will crash. This is on the beta. They've resolved it with iPadOS 26.5 Beta 3, but it does crash the OS, or at least crash Safari when you're on 26.4.2. And speaking of iOS 26.5 Beta 3, I've been using it full time on my main device, and the number one issue for me is basically frame rate drops when you go in or just swipe up and then scroll over. You'll see that really lagged pretty badly right there. So again, let's swipe up, slide over, and it lags quite a bit. Now it's fast after you do the initial scroll, but it does lag every time, at least on the beta for me, where it doesn't on 26.4.2 that much. It does seem to be very stable. Also, when gaming, frame rates stay higher, and also it seems to be just generally positive as far as the comments go. It did seem to fix heating issues. We'll talk about that in a moment, but again, there's that lag when you swipe, and again, if you're idle for a moment, swipe again, then it slows down. I've noticed that over and over, but everything else seems to be nice and fast and fluid beyond that. So again, scrolling is fast, except for right there. ProMotion seems to be okay from time to time, but again, it's odd that it just lags like that, and you can see that on and off. So again, with performance, everything seems to be fast with the exception of that lag. So going into the developer app, RAM management is good. Going back, going into folders, things are smooth, but again, can lag quite a bit. The wallpaper bug seems to be a little bit better here. So again, we'll swipe up. It definitely seems better in this beta. As far as heat and thermals, well, it's great on both according to the comments, both 26.4.2 and 26.5 Beta 3, but let's go ahead and run benchmarks and then compare them. On the iPhone 17 Pro Max running iOS 26.5 Beta 3, we're at about 37 degrees Celsius at the hottest point, and then on the iPhone Air running iOS 26.4.2, around 40 degrees Celsius at the hottest point. So it goes up and down, of course, as it's done running benchmarks, but let's go ahead and take a look here. Benchmarks completed, and with iOS 26.4.2, we have 3,703 for single core, 9,455 for multi-core. If we take a look at the history, I did run it a couple times, and it's well within the margin of error. If you run this a couple more times, you'll get varying results. When it comes to iOS 26.5 Beta 3, again, 3,781 for single core, 9,882 for multi-core. If we take a look at the history, it actually has gone down slightly for multi-core and is very similar for single core. So again, well within the margin of error. It's performing well other than the stutters I showed you. Now, if you're wondering if you should install iOS 26.4.2 or iOS 26.5 betas, it really depends what version you're on. If you're on the public version, I would recommend iOS 26.4.2 as it seems to resolve most of the issues for most people. However, if you're beta testing already, then try out Beta 3 if you haven't already. Other than that, I would wait for the public release or at least the RC before you try it on your main device. When it comes to overall battery life, well, 0 people are again complaining about iOS 18.7.8. No real things to talk about there with the overall battery life. Seems to be as expected. But with iOS 26.4.2, it seems to be great for most people except older devices with iPhone 12 and older. However, they still may be indexing as their processors are a little bit slower. But 78% so far have said they have better battery. And let's take a look at results from someone that sent in theirs. So thanks to Cameron for sending this in. This is on an iPhone 17 Pro Max with 100% battery health. And you'll see he had 4 hours and 44 minutes of screen active time, 10 minutes of screen idle time, and used 40% of his battery. So far, it's easily getting him through the day and seems like it's improving since it was installed. So great battery life so far. And as far as iOS 26.5 Beta 3's battery life, again, I've been using it full time on my main device. Let's go back here. We'll go to battery health, and you'll see I'm at 100% capacity with 69 cycles. If we take a look at the overall usage, today was actually pretty good. 3 hours and 49 minutes of screen active time, 14 minutes of screen idle time, and I've used 54% of the battery so far. So much, much better than I've seen before. Again, 70% with 3 hours. So it looks like maybe I'll get 8 hours finally on my phone, and it seems to be improving. So it looks like Apple's really fixed this update, and most people say iOS 26.5 Beta 3 is better, about 50% or so. Now, as far as the overall experience and what you had to say, let's take a look at some of your comments. GV Patton says, battery life has improved for me on iOS 26.4.2 on my iPhone 16. White Shark 2060 said, battery life has significantly improved on my 13 Pro Max since updating to iOS 26.4.2. Aiden Middleton 4550 said, I'm currently on iOS 26.4.2 on iPhone 17 Pro Max. Performance is super fast, feels super smooth, and battery hit life is great. No complaints. Apple is moving in the right direction. Can't wait for iOS 27 and Siri 2.0. Paul the Dude 101 said, I'm using iOS 26.4.2 on my iPhone 14, and so far it's running really good for me. I don't have any complaints with it, and CarPlay seems to run very efficient on my end. Anas Sharobi 5059 said, running iOS 26.4.2 on my 14 Pro Max. Everything is just fine and smooth. Battery life is a little bit better than 26.4.1, but sometimes swiping animation feels stuttering. Boogle23 said, using iPhone 16 Pro Max on iOS 26.4.2 has been great. Performance-wise and how I use my phone has been really smooth. Battery is a bit okay, but since it just got updated, I expect the battery life to be much better after a couple days, but still battery easily gets me through the day. Same wise on my iPad Pro 11-inch M4, overall no issues on the update. OG Trilogy 4908 said, iOS 26.4.2 on iPhone 17 Pro. Seems nice and smooth for me and a lot faster at opening apps and Face ID. Mr. AJ07 said, 26.4.2 improved battery performance significantly on my iPhone 14. No battery drain when the iPhone is idle. Hawkins Tech said, Zolotech, I'm running iOS 26.5 Beta 3 on my iPhone 14, iPhone 12, and iPad Air from 2020. And my iPhone 14, my battery life is not that great, as I've had 4 hours and 7 minutes of screen on time, and I've had 23 minutes of screen off time, and used 67% of the battery with 85% battery health, as this is a used iPhone 14. Pulissa Luchevi says, iOS 26.5 Beta 3 is insane smooth and way more stable. In-game, I have better stability, FPS, and the battery is good too. And for the moment, I have no bugs except one from Beta 2. Let's go ahead and take a look at storage. So we'll take a look at 26.4.2 on the left, iOS 26.5 Beta 3 on the right. We'll go into Settings, General, and then iPhone Storage. Scroll to the bottom, and we'll go into our iOS update here. So iOS itself is a little bit larger on iOS 26.5 at 14.23 gigabytes compared to 14.01 gigabytes. Apple Intelligence is identical. So basically the same. Of course, being a beta, it could shrink by the time it's released to the public. When it comes to system data, that goes up and down as needed, sometimes down to 1 gigabyte, sometimes up to 60 gigabytes. It just uses it as needed, so I never pay attention to it. With iOS 18.7.8, this is the safe haven. I'll give it an A for a grade for now, and for those users who have chosen to stay behind, iOS 18.7.8 is still the golden standard for stability. It seems to be mostly bug-free with good battery and performance. With iOS 26.4.2, it's a step in the right direction. For now, I'll give it a B+, as we'll have to wait and see what it's like for a few weeks, but so far, iOS 26.4.2 is seen as a very positive update, with it fixing CarPlay, RAM management improvements, and it feels smooth and fast overall. There are still a few issues here and there, but at this point last year, we had quite a few issues with iOS 18.4 as well. iOS 26.4.2 definitely refines the experience and is a move in the right direction for now. With iOS 26.5 Beta 3, it's insanely smooth for the most part. I'll give it a B+ for now, but iOS 26.5 Beta 3 has super smoothness throughout for new and old devices for most users, with the exception I mentioned earlier, unlocking the device, swiping up, and then scrolling over. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes it's not, but seems to be very, very smooth in general. Many have a good performance experience, good battery, but not as much as iOS 26.4.2 yet. But it is still a beta, so we have time for them to sort this out. Sadly, for those that want the best experience of iOS, there's no way to downgrade just yet. I don't think there will be, but at least Apple's providing updates for now. So that's everything with iOS 26.4.2, the overall verdict, and iOS 26.5 Beta 3. Hopefully we'll see some more improvements very soon, and of course iOS 27 should be pretty exciting as well, hopefully bringing that stability many of us have wanted. Let me know how it's going for you in the comments below, and of course I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.